Hello and welcome back to Massive Crit. I'm well aware of the challenge that Ben from Battle Brothers Tabletop has issued to kitbash the Phobos strike team into something interesting, and honestly, this makes complete sense. The Phobos strike team are definitely the ugly duckling from the Marok Kill Team release, and the team most in need of a facelift. Yet, here on Massive Crit, I have decided to take arguably one of the best looking kill teams released so far, the Blooded, and kitbash them into a slightly different looking Blooded kill team. Retrospect is a mother. If for some reason you haven't seen and you want to see how Battle Brothers Tabletop, Threes to Wound, and GFN Gaming are doing with their Kitbash challenge, I'll include their latest videos at the point of recording this in the description below for your fanciful perusal. Away we go. I'm not the most confident kit basher. In fact, this is my most extensive kit bash to date, with my previous experience culminating in a few weapon or arm swaps. For this project, I'm going to break out of my comfort zone and dive in balls deep with no protection, starting with the Enforcer. I clipped the model off the sprue and immediately made my first mistake, dry fitting the push fit model. It went in like a dream, but trying to get it back out again was a mission. After a good 10 minutes and causing white stress marks to some of the plastic, I managed to get it free so I could glue it. If it was so hard to get out again, why did I need to glue it, I hear you say? Well, good point. I have no idea why, but what can I say? Learning is a process. But anyway, Tzeentch is my favourite Chaos God, and I wanted my Blooded Kill team to look like they are marked by Tzeentch, so unfortunately this meant the Power Fist needed to go in favour of something more magical. I've had an Ahriman lying about for a while from when I bought the old Thousand Suns start collecting, and his magical arm I thought would make the perfect proxy for a Power Fist. I'm not sure where all the footage of me chopping down the arm went, but I just removed the bulk of the arm with the clippers and slowly trimmed the remaining arm down in between, measuring, just to make sure that the gauntlet that remains wouldn't look too odd on the model when I'm finished. It took a lot of filing, cutting and trimming, but I finally managed to get the gauntlet sitting in a place where I was happy with. I intended to neaten it up and blend the two together with green stuff at a later stage, so it didn't have to be overly neat. I didn't want to glue the gauntlet on yet because now I was thoroughly feeling like Sid from Toy Story 1 and I wanted to make some further changes. The Ahriman sprue had a part that looked like it could make a perfectly large, obnoxious collar, so I removed it from the sprue and held it up to the model to make sure I could make it work before committing. Feeling confident, I clipped off the banner poles and I removed the collar that was already on the model to make room for the new one. After this, it was just a case of cutting and filing the new collar and where the old collar used to be down to make sure that it fit well without too much need for green stuff at a later stage. At this point, I realised I'd made my second mistake. I should have read the instructions. I needed to glue the head in position when I glued the body together, but after a little trimming, I managed to glue the head in place okay. Next to use from the Ahriman sprue is this cool looking book I just got to, and this little tassel thing to hide a Chaos Undivided symbol. I removed the symbol carefully with my hobby knife and flattening down the area with the blunt end of my knife in order to hide it better with the new Tzeentch symbol. I then cut the little tassel thing down to the right size so it doesn't look weird. And once I'm happy with the size, I just glue it into place. The Enforcer no longer has his power fist, so next I removed the power cables, but leaving the power pack because it was just too much effort to remove, and I don't think it needs an excuse to be there really, it just looks cool. I also glued the collar on previously to this step, which kept falling off when removing the power cable, so I should have just stuck the collar down after this stage. Now it's a simple case of gluing Araman's hand to the arm, and when that's drying I also glue the spellbook to the back of the Enforcer's trench coat. Finally I slot him into his base, which I do go back to later to glue down, and then I fix the gauntlet onto the arm. With that final piece, the first part of his conversion is complete, so far I've got to say I'm pretty pleased with how he came out, but this is just the easy stage. Next up we have the green stuff phase, but this is just how he's looking so far pre-green stuff. Now that can give you a good look at him. I'm a complete novice when it comes to green stuff. The only thing I've sculpted is this little ribbon to reinforce the staff on the Corsair after I broke it. No one ever got better at anything without practice, so let's go. I cut out what I thought would be enough putty, but of course it ended up being too much, and I've watched a few tutorials on YouTube, and in every vid the person cut the middle away because the middle cures, and if not removed I would find unwanted lumps in the putty, so I started with this. My aim with mixing the green stuff together, well, was to mix it until I had a consistent green with no variation in colour. The best way I found was to twist and squeegee it together until I achieved the result I wanted. I wanted to make the putty more manageable when I applied it to the model, so I tore little bits off and rolled them out into long, thin sausages. When rolling them out, I applied pressure first to the middle of the sausage and then worked the green stuff out to the ends, which gave me a pretty consistent length to the end result. These sausages were going to end up being straps on the belts and buck, so I rolled them out and left them to cure a little on top of a piece of hydration paper while I work on different areas of the model. To get warmed up, I start to fill the gaps around the collar, tearing little pieces off and using this paint mixer from AK to pick up the green stuff and place it on the model. I then used these silicone shapers from Green Stuff World, moistened with water to work the putty into the gap before trying to make the layer as even as possible. To make the join between green stuff and plastic as seamless as possible, I take the silicone shaper and drag the green stuff out to ensure I have no visible gaps when it's dry. Happy with the result, I started to work on the straps that I left to cure. I straightened the sausages out on top of the hydration paper, and without using any water and using a silicone shaper with a straight edge, I pressed the green stuff down to flatten it out into a rough strap-like shape. I then removed it by peeling away the hydration paper, being careful not to stretch the green stuff if I could help it. I then fixed the green stuff onto the book using the flat-edged shaper to ensure the bond was tight. Cutting away any excess with a hobby knife. I then repeated this step for the second strap. In an effort to make them more like straps, I used the flat-edged shaper to invert the middle of the straps, like what we see in proper GW models, and then did my best to straighten the straps back out afterwards. Using the same method, I made a sort of cross out of the green stuff to try and make it look like the book was strapped to the belt of the Enforcer's trench coat. And again, I did the same to the tassel thing that I put on the front of the model just to neaten it up a bit. And this is how he's looking so far, just after those stages. So just his arm left to do now. For the arm, again, I just worked the green stuff into all the gaps, creating a good solid layer before sculpting some creases in to make it look like it's part of the trench coat. This didn't seem too difficult at the time because I just followed the contours of the upper arm left from the original model. For the troopers themselves, I made a few little changes using the K-Rick Acolyte box from Major Sigmar, but as not to take up too much time, I'll just quick fire through a few of them. Like chopping down an axe to make a more Tzeentch looking club for the thug, changing up the blades on the Flenser, exchanging the power weapon on the Butcher for a Tzeentchy axe, changing up the shield on the Trench Sweeper, and because I still had my Vet Guard from the Octarius set, I decided to convert some of them so that I could have a full roster of the Blooded. I cut off the more Krieg looking bits and smoothed those areas down. The collar was a problem to fit the Acolyte heads into, so they needed trimming down a bit. And where I could, I used cloaks and backpacks to cover the holes in the backs of the Krieg. Otherwise, I used green stuff to fill in the hole as best I could. I'm a Harry Potter fanboy, and I really like the way the Death Eaters in Harry Potter all wear masks, except for Voldemort, so I wanted to bring that kind of idea into my kill team, hence why I bought the K-Rick Acolytes. After some tweaking, I managed to get the heads to fit both the Blooded and the Krieg bodies, and I think the end result looks pretty sweet. Especially the Butcher, which I'm working on now. He's definitely got some kind of like evil serial killer vibes to him. I love it. But I'll showcase them all at the end because I've saved the best for last, the Ogryn. To start with, I wanted to use the basic chassis from the Traitor Ogryn because the uniform would keep him looking more 40k and less AOS, so I just glued him together and removed the mold lines. I am a fan of the body horror vibes that the Ogryn has, but I don't think it kept with the Tzeentch vibe, so I cut away the Chaos Star that was fused with his body and cleaned it up with my hobby knife. I wanted to find something more Tzeentchy than what came with the Ogryn, settling with the Ogroid Thaumaturge, or however the hell you say it, which I thought had more appropriate arms and weapon for the vibe I was looking for. I did, however, want to keep as much of the Ogryn armour as possible, so I brought out my hobby saw, which I bought for this very occasion to remove the mutated part of the arm, and cleaning the cut up afterwards. I then glued the shoulder in place, ready for the other part of the arm. I did my best to measure the arm up to the shoulder to give me an idea of how much to cut away, and after some cutting and neatening up, I managed to get it to sit pretty well. Next was the weapon arm, which was a little more tricky than the previous step because I wanted to swap the hands out without breaking the weapon itself. I started by making a groove with my hobby knife to guide the saw and then very carefully remove the hands from both components, measuring and trimming the new hand with the arm until I was happy. I then glued the arm into place. Next, I thought I'd check the instructions this time before building the weapon, just to make sure I was doing it correctly and wouldn't have to go back and change anything. I then glued the horns to the head, which did take some time because I didn't have a lot to glue them onto at this point, and then I decided to glue the model to the base, attach the arm, finish off the weapon, and glue the hand onto the other arm. There was a great big hole in the neck where I wanted to glue the head onto, so I cut out a bit of sprue, glued it inside the hole and trimmed it down. I just thought this would give more surface area for the glue to work with, hopefully preventing the head from falling off in future steps. And this is how he looks pre-green stuff, so yeah, green stuff next. Swapping the left arm out left a dirty great hole which needed to be filled. My plan of action was to build it up in sections of muscle, committing to the lowest muscle before building on top. I started by making a foundation on the back where the biggest hole was by jamming loads of green stuff inside and tidying it up for future stages. I also needed to build the neck and head, so I moved on to this stage to give the previous step time to cure a little. I wanted to make it as realistic as possible, so I built the neck up by adding blobs of green stuff in the rough shapes I perceived the muscle to naturally be. This again was another foundation layer, so I tried not to spend too much time on this, but it still took quite a while. Happy with the result, I rolled up a ball of green stuff for the foundation of the top of the head and worked it deep into all the crevices. Then, as best I could, I moulded the horns together, ready to build up the dome of the head on top. Now, trying to allow this stage to cure a little, I returned to the back and arm to shape the latissimus muscle properly so I can start adding the tricep muscle on top. This doesn't take too long and I move back to the head. I roll up another ball and place it where I think is most natural. I sculpt the head into the horns and neck, but trying to be careful to leave some grooves for the painting stage, so the end result doesn't just look like a great big indistinguishable mass. Now for this final stage, I might have tried to be a bit too clever, but the sculpt's going well so far. So I took inspiration from the massive bodybuilders like The Rock. I've noticed the backs of their necks have folds and creases of skin, like probably due to their mighty gains, so I tried to replicate this on my Ogrin. I apply some trusty sausages to the back of the neck and do my best to sculpt them into creases. After this, I go back to the arm and put another little ball in there to sculpt it into a tricep muscle. And with that, he's virtually finished. I do go back and green stuff some of the gaps in the model, but this is essentially how he looks finished. And here they all are together in the background, and I think they're looking pretty sweet. They took a long time to complete, but I'm pretty happy with the result so far. I still need to paint them yet, mind, and there's loads of them. I like Kill Team because of the low model count, but I seem to have a small army here. Going to have to come up with a scheme that doesn't take too long. The heavy metal style does look good, but it takes the piss to paint. So I'm experimenting with different schemes other than the heavy metal style at the moment. So I'll definitely do a painting video for these chaps and come up with some lore to go alongside. So if you don't want to miss out, consider subscribing today. So there we have it. I'd love to know what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Is there anything you would do different? Do you think it was a bit pointless considering how low down on the meta the Blooded are at the moment? Their rules are probably useless. Maybe I should have done a different team. Also, if you have any tips or tricks whilst working with green stuff, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. And until next time, may you always crit massive.